Welcome everyone to this very special session. I've got Dean Law here, and we're going to look at ways you can up your scope
Okay,
game.
see.
Now, this is a
Okay, see.
combination of video and audio session. I can hear the crashing around as we're really desperately trying to get Dean Law of Law's Automotive in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, our regular contributor, who has a scope on screen, and he's going to be doing some things here. Dean, what I will say is, for those who are listening on the podcast, Great Canadian Aftermarket Podcast, presented by Delphi Technologies. Nothing here in the scope front is any kind of endorsement of the products, but we picked a fairly common platform to work with, right, Dean? And what are we going to be looking at on the scope today?
Okay, absolutely, Andrew. What we're looking at is just a basic scope at the 20 megahertz bandwidth. That means it's just a basic amount. So Pico has the same bandwidth, better sampling rate. I'm not going to get into that right now. This one right here, your voltage over time, your time seconds down here, and your voltages. So that's what we're looking at. It's a snap-on. So every other snap-on out there, you're going to have the same platform. Autel is pretty much the same. It's just a couple of different knobs are in a couple of different places. And Pico is more laptop based. This is just a tablet, as you can see, a little bit more functionality and usefulness. So you can look at live data and process data, which we all need to be looking at today. So that's what we can start with.
Good stuff. Okay, now you wanted to run through a couple of scenarios, and I'll just kind of let you take it from here.
Okay, a couple of scenarios. So what do we really need a scope for? Here's one scenario we can give you. Communication. Today, communication is happening faster and faster and faster. The multimeters, the digital volt ohm meter is not fast enough to catch the communications that are going on inside the computers today. So we needed something like a graphing meter. The graphing meter has evolved from just a graphing meter, which the Vantage Pro, Fluke 98, stuff like that, that's all graphing meters. But the graphing meter is still not fast enough. We've upped the game again in 2000, and most European and Asian products have gone 2000 and newer. All communications, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, they picked up the ball and started running with it in 2010, 2012. You're really seeing a lot of drive-by-wire communications. That's the reason why we need a lab scope today. Multimeters are gone. You could use them for basic voltage readings. But here's a scenario here. So if we're going to be looking at a battery, right? Doesn't matter what kind of car this is, it's basically the same thing in all make and models of a vehicle. It's a battery. This is the load in the circuit, okay? Stuff that I'll be talking about, there's a lot of in-depth questions, and I understand that. But with a battery, it's called the load in the circuit. That's what gets your charging system working. Without this load, without this battery, which is a capacitor, the system won't function correctly. There's all sorts of electrical problems, all sorts of electrical issues, communication issues, and also voltage supply issues, like the phone I'm on today, or the phone that you're watching. That phone has a charger, right? How many voltages does that charger need? That transformer, right? Because we're going from alternating current to direct current to charge your battery. How many voltages does your battery need on your phone to charge? Good question. Look at your battery. I could take you over quickly. Let's take a look at a battery, people. This is the information that's on your battery. Get some information. I'm not too sure, but this one here is 3.42 amps at 19 volts. So if that transformer is not producing 19 volts and it's producing 18 volts, will it charge my phone? No, it will not, because it needs 19 volts. Now, don't get me wrong, we're talking about 12-volt systems, right? Battery, 6 cells, 2.11 volts per cell, that equals 12.66 saturated, full saturated battery. That information is one thing. There's also something called RC. I'm not going to get too far into that because it's about a half an hour to 45-minute discussion just on reserve capacity. But reserve capacity is highly important today, especially with computers on board. What did I just say? If a computer, this car here, this Cadillac, it's a 2019, there is 32 modules. It's 32 computers. You got that right. And they also have submodules. So you're looking between 5 to 10 submodules per module. You times 32 by 5, you got that right. That's a lot of modules, and they need power to stay in operation. You go to start this vehicle, and it doesn't have enough voltages. Here's some meat and potatoes for you guys. Pay attention to this. If this battery doesn't have enough voltages, how do you test the battery? No, I'm not talking about going to get your battery testing equipment, because that's still a computer. That still has computers and monitoring systems that you have to watch. You're not watching it, the computer is. So how do you know if that information is correct? I don't use a battery checker here at the shop. Not that there's anything wrong with them. My preference is to use an oscilloscope. That's what we're talking about today. I haven't really used a multimeter, really, besides unless I'm going underneath a dash and I'm looking at a voltage supply quickly. I'm not going to go and grab my oscilloscope to go underneath the dash and look at that. I'll grab my multimeter to check it. But now here's the meat and potatoes of this part here. What is reserve capacity? What that means is that it will supply the voltages to the system. All these computers on board are going to need at least, there's a debate out there right now, anywhere between 9.75 to 10.5 volts is what most computers need today. So if we're going to be looking at the PCM, let's look at this guy right down inside here, right? Let's look at the PCM, powertrain control module. That powertrain control module is going to need no less than 9.75 volts. So you hook it up, you take your digital voltmeter, and you check your battery voltages, and it's at 12.59, which is okay. It's at 90% battery life. Is that good? Well, most people say it is. How do you test it now? You got to, anything in an electrical circuit, you have to check loaded. You cannot check it just stationary. To test the battery correctly, you have to let the battery do what? Anybody in the questions? Nobody yet? Okay. You're going to have to let this battery chemically calm down before you can check the battery correctly. You're going to have a surface charge. You're going to have refresh charge. So after an hour, you let the battery sit, and then you check it. Okay. It's 12.6, 12.59. Groovy. Is that good enough to start the system? Probably. Here's another way to check it. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the whoop, there goes my pressure transducer down into the engine bay. Groovy. That's awesome. All right. Might get to that one later on. These are the voltages on the side here. This part here is where you set up the voltages. You can set this up anywhere that you have to know the system you're testing. If you don't know the voltages on that system, figure it out. It's called Schottky. It's called Mitchell. We pay a lot of money for this information, and that information comes directly from Cadillac and GM or Toyota or Ford, and they're going to give you a description, an operation on and how the system works. So if you need to know what the proper system voltage is supposed to be, it will tell you B plus or near B plus, which is 12.6 or 12.5. So we're going to we're going to be checking a battery, which is going to be 12.6 volts. So let's go to a 20 volt scale, right? This line right here, one thing about you need to know about scopes, it doesn't matter where, Groovy, I just moved that. So I'm going to have to get that set back up. But there is 4 scope leads on these today. And it doesn't matter if I'm using a voltage in one or the other or the other or the other. I could use this, or I can go and grab my amp clamp, and I can hook my amp clamp up to channel 2 or channel 1 or channel 4 or channel 3. It doesn't really matter. The only time it matters, most scopes will tell you, is if you can see, if it says right here, resistance. So if you're going to be checking resistance in the circuit, you need to know that 2, 3, and 4 are going to need to be hooked up together. You can check resistance in the system. Besides that, these are all checked. Make sure you look 50 volts and 70 volts, 75 volts max. You need to know what your scopes can handle. That's why certain scope leads will have grounds off of them. If anybody else is using these type of scopes in the field like Snap-on, the other thing you need to know about upping your scope here is you're going to have two grounds here, right? These two grounds, one ground and an X ground. This ground here should be put into the ground. That's first and foremost. The reason why this is a single ground is because if you have a voltage spike in your circuit and you have another lead attached to it, that's what this little guy over here is for. I'm sorry. This is important information. This is a stackable lead. So instead of getting a voltage spike, say from a secondary ignition system or whatever, through this line, it's going to go directly to ground. It won't go through the module. Very important. Your employer or even yourself, if you own this tool, you'll love being able to stack this because that's the way it should look. It should never be stacked inside your scope. Little bit of tidbit of information. Okay, now let's get to some testing quickly. So we're going to be going to channel 1. So I'm going to set this back up. Give me 1 second here. Okay, we're going to turn off channel 2. We're going to turn on channel 1. This here is the probe lead. We're going to be testing volts DC, which is set already. And it's going to be at a 20 volt max. And the best thing that I can give you right now is set up your scope for 2020. 20 volts, 20 milliseconds, go from there, start sampling, start doing different things. If you can't see the signal correctly, go to 2 milliseconds. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole couple hour training module of getting into milliseconds, seconds, and nanoseconds. But milliseconds, there's 60,000 milliseconds in a minute, and there's 60 million samples in 1 minute in nanoseconds there. So that's something for you to chew on. A lot of sampling. All right. So we'll go back to 20. Okay, now we're set up to do a basic test on a charge or on a battery itself. So you want to hook up your one scope lead to your positive and one to your ground. Now, we got to make sure your leads are hooked up. Always check, always check your connections. Make sure they're good, right? Okay, because if they're not, you're not going to get the proper signal. Okay, gonna make sure you guys can actually see that correctly. This here is at 12.5. The way I can do that is going back into the next screen. Does this help? I don't know if I can zoom in. Does that help? Can you see that a little bit better?
We can see along the scale on the left that it's about 12.5. So actually,
Okay.
if you zoom it back out again, because actually we're missing a lot.
Okay, perfect. So we have 12.56 volts. Is that good? I don't know. I guess that's good. It's 12.56. So you should be in and around 75%, 80% of the battery capacity. Now, what's RC? All these computers. So if I go and turn this key on right now, those voltages are going to drop. And then when I go to crank it, when I put the load on the circuit, the fuel pump is running, the injectors are running, the coil packs, which are step-up transformers, that's what they are today, they're going to need 12 volts. So it's going to pull all these voltages down. All these computers online, they're going to need, guess what? At least no less than 9.75 volts. And if this thing drops below that, these things are going to start having error codes left, right, and center. Battery voltage is low. Battery voltage is low. You go and check the battery voltages with a digital volt ohm meter. You're not going to see what you're going to see right now. So I'm just going to set this up quickly, just to a different scale. I could do some other classes on that at a different time. This one will give us some more time. I'm not going to get into triggering. I don't want to get this confusing. I just want to keep it as simple as possible. This right here is monitoring the charging system. Now let's go over to the ignition quickly. and see if we can start this thing up and see what happens to the voltages that are on the screen, and I'll go over that quickly. You should be seeing the battery voltages dropping already. So what we're going to be doing to do a proper battery test in vehicles today, what you're going to do is you're going to crank it, make sure that's not going to fall, make sure there's no leads in front of anything. 1, 2. Okay, that's it. Now, we just checked the state of charge of this battery. All those drops right there. No, there we go. Now, if you're looking at this at the lead right now, all these voltage drops from here, 12 volts, 12.5, it's dropping right down. You can get a scale, you can get your cursors out. Not going to get involved in the cursors right now, but what we can do is we can pull the cursor in to know exactly, oh, okay, let's do some fun. Let's show some cursors. We'll show you what they're doing. This over here on this side here, this is cursor 1, cursor 2, cursor 1, right? You can pull this over. This is cursor 1, so we'll set it on the lowest voltage drop here. Cursor 2, sorry. Cursor 2, we're going to pull it over to the highest peak here. All right, so what we're going to go over, let's get this just a little bit more over here. We got to get it to the highest points possible, or the lowest point possible, I should say. 8. So there we go. Okay, I just pulled cursor 1 over. Here's cursor 1, 8.57. 8.57. That already tells me the RC of this battery is not strong enough, and it's going to start throwing codes left, right, and center. You will not get that on a digital ohm meter. On top of it, you can actually see right here, right where the injectors are turning on. You can see exactly what was happening with the starter. You can see the alternator coming alive. You can actually see the fuel pumps and everything else, and then the alternator starts to kick in. So let's see what the alternator is pushing out. 13.47. That's the cursor over here on cursor 2. That's 13.47. So we just eliminated 2 different things. 1, battery, RC. Is it good enough? No, it's not. If you look at this number here, it's way too low. It's going to start sending codes. Number 2, is the charging system working? For right now, we know by a quick setup, this would literally take you no more than getting the vehicle, even going out to the vehicle. Don't start the vehicle. Like I said, you need to open state of charge of that battery first, write that down, hook it up. This will take you no more than 3 to 4 minutes to do it from complete to finish, to know if you have a good battery and a good charging system. Once this is up and running, you'll see 13.47. We know the battery's weak, but the alternator is good. So there's two tests within 4 minutes. You already could tell your service writer or your service manager, or you can even tell the customer saying, hey, you know what, your battery's weak, but your charging system's good. I wouldn't recommend driving this car until we can actually get that battery fixed. Because something else I can get into, but I don't have enough time today to get into that, is how do you check a battery? What's the other check can we do? That's some good questions. See if anybody can actually come up with those questions that we can get to some answers. If you guys put your questions out there, see who wants to know how can you check a battery. I want people to ask that question. I'm not going to tell you. Okay. All right. So it involves, I'll give you a little bit of tip. It involves an amp clamp. Okay. But people don't know how to check that.
Just a quick note for folks listening and watching, depending on what platform you're listening or watching this on, just make the comments either through where it's posted, or you can send us some emails at Indie Garage, or just make comments on wherever this is posted, and we'll make sure that those questions get dealt with and relayed. And if we have a few that take a little bit longer to answer, we'll do a follow-up session on this. Okay, just for folks listening. So.
Okay, so the importance we just went over, like I was saying from the beginning, I went over the importance of a scope. Number 2, why we need a scope. Number 3, how well a scope could work. You don't need a battery charge, like a battery tester, you can throw that thing away. You have one tool that can do many different things. You go to a car with an amp clamp and a couple of test leads, man, you're flying. You're knocking cars out of the park left, right, and center, because you're not sitting there spending the time. Okay, we got to pull the vehicle in. We got to do this. We got to do that. Well, the next stage, and I know people are going to say in the audience, well, he didn't say that you got to pull the battery out and charge it up. Okay, well, we did charge the battery up. This is a vehicle that I'm in the middle of my computer analysis on this. It's having electrical issues. I've already charged up the battery. So anybody out there saying, did you charge it up? Yes, we did. We gave it a full charge. It was up to 12.66 and the battery is still weak. So now we're going to have to replace it. Anything else? Does anybody know what communication looks like? People need to get to know this stuff. If you don't know this stuff within 3 to 4 years, I can guarantee you, remember this, you're going to say, oh, you know what? Indie Garage, Dean and Andrew, they're talking about this. And you know what? They're right. Maybe a lot of you are younger. You're in your teens, your 20s and 30s. You're not going to remember what happened in the 80s. You're not going to know what happened to the 80s when the first transistor came out in electronic spark control. And all the technicians hung up their tool belts off a simple thing of an input, an output, and a transistor, and a power and a ground. That's it. Power to turn the bloody thing on, a ground for it to run, a input from your distributor to the transistor to turn it on to ground your coil pack. That's it. Everybody hung up their tool belt because they didn't understand that. It was a shame, and that's happening today. So let's go over one more thing. I'm going to give you some communications, and nobody has seen this yet. How does a car know? Okay, look, watch what's happening inside the vehicle when I touch the door handle. Look, dash is already turning on. The lights were turning on. I also, if you were here at my shop, you would actually have heard the fuel pump prime. Yes, well, when you're dealing with a GDI system, gas direct injected system, people are not patient. They get into the vehicle, they crank the vehicle, they start the vehicle, and they start driving. They don't have the time for the system to wait. So what it does is by the time you touch the door handle, this thing is already engaging the circuits and getting things ready to turn on. And now, why are we not turning on? Give me 1 second here. I have the keys. Maybe there we go. I just need to hang this outside. Bear with me for 1 more minute. All right, here we go. This is a breakout box. I use this constantly when I'm doing any type of computer analysis. What is computer analysis? Look it up. You understand what I'm calling it, computer analysis. I'm not doing diagnostics anymore, guys. Diagnostics, you use flow charts. Flow charts will get you in trouble. Do computer analysis. Learn the systems, learn how they work, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the scope leads off here. We are going to take off, bear with me, the shaky screen. Don't look at the screen, just look at this nice screen. Take some screenshots, guys. Get to know what this stuff looks like. Start using this in the service bay. Next thing you know, your service manager, service writer, and even your clients are going to be like, my goodness, this guy and this girl, wow, they know what they're doing. The last place said the battery was fine, and you just look like a superhero. Okay, trust me.
I have to start handing out superhero shirts.
It never gets old. Basically, today, that's what we're dealing with, superhero. Okay, I'm going to have to move this over quickly, and then I'll reset the camera up.
Yep. Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, what we're doing here is I'm going to hook this up to the breakout box, to one to the chassis ground, and one to the can low. Let's go in the can low. Let's see what can low looks like. All right. I'm gonna put you down for 1 more second here. I'm gonna get the setup quickly so we don't run out of time. Okay, let's get rid of the screen. Let's back out. Now we're gonna have to get into something that's quicker, faster.
Well, now you're talking about the $6 million man. So, you know, look at that.
Exactly. Now, see this right here. This is what I'm talking about. This is communication, right? this is what's happening. What does that look like? Little small little communication packets. That's how these computers are communicating together. Without this communication, nothing works. This is a GM, so it has something called LIN. That LIN signal wakes everything up. It says, hey, come on, everybody out of bed, wake up. And this is what you're going to see. This is called low, CAN low, and then you have CAN high. So let's just keep it simple. Let's look at CAN low very quickly here. First of all, like I said, started at 2020. All right, we have a 2 points. It's going from minimum 0.38 to 2.71. Okay, so let's get this set back up. I'm going to take the volts because it was at 2. Let's put it to 5 and see what happens to that signal. Wow, that just brought that signal in a little bit better, right? See this communication packets? If you had a CAN high, it would look exactly the same. It would be a mirror image of the CAN low. CAN low is going to run from 1 point, well, a little bit lower than 1 volt. I'm not going to get to the technical side of it, up to 2.5 volts, and then CAN high is going to run from 2.5 to 3.5. So that's kind of the system. I'm not going to get into that. That's another training in itself, and I'm not going to get myself in trouble. Okay. If you want to see more of the signal, decrease the time. If you want to see more, less of it in more detail, zoom in, get more milliseconds. And what you can do is you can freeze it, and you can look at that signal and see what it looks like if it's correct or not.
Yeah. So those low dips, what is that showing us?
That's mostly communication, ones and zeros. Computers always work with ones and zeros. There is new ones coming out that can be either 1 or 0. Very careful on that topic. It can be 0 or 1. It's non-binary. Type of transistors that are coming out today. I think Tesla was making them. I'm not too sure. They were making a brand new one because China's not making their whatever the situation is. They're inventing a new type of transistor. It could be either a 1 or 0.
Right.
It's awesome.
Right. So
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, is this what you would call like a normal signal then?
This one here would be a normal signal. Absolutely. This is a normal communication for the CAN low in a GM system. With a little bit of training, a little bit of understanding, you can understand if this thing has a bad ground or a bad power, or if a module's starting to short out. You can actually do that. There's something that's going to be coding that I'm actually doing some learning because I've never stopped learning. One good question for you guys and girls: what is a good day to you? I want to see that in the description. I want to see what everybody thinks a good day is, and then I'll give you an answer of what I think a good day is. Okay. But even for me, I'm learning. I've been doing this for 20 plus years, doing high-end computer analysis, and I'm still learning. I'm going into a system to learn communication and coding, because coding today is something that's going to be huge. You need to know that, but you need to pick this scope up. That's where it's saying up your scope. Pick it up.
There we go.
Pick it up.
Yeah,
Start using it.
that sounds like a great thing. I mean, we have so much more we could talk about for sure. I mean, this is for
Absolutely.
hours and hours, and Dean and I probably will for everyone listening. But I know he's got things that he's doing. It's a working shop, right? Which is what we like to do. He's not just some ivory tower trainer or something.
No, unfortunately not. Not yet.
Unfortunately not. But we do appreciate his time. I hope you appreciate it. We appreciate your time if you've been listening too. If you have questions for Dean, if you, as I mentioned, just wherever you see this posted, wherever you're watching this, or wherever you're listening, you go into, if it's on our podcast, go to the show notes. We'll provide an email that you can send a note to for questions. If you're watching on IndieGarage.ca, just make in the comments there with any questions. If you're watching it on, say, LinkedIn, make a comment there and ask your questions, and we will do our best to get those answers for you. And if we get some ones that are a little bit difficult to answer just in a few words, we'll do a follow-up, and we'll probably end up doing that anyway. But we appreciate everybody's time, you, Dean, especially. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching and taking part. And if you like this kind of thing, let us know that too, because we'd love to do more of it. Awesome. Take care, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other, and we will catch you next time. Take care.